How'd you feel last week's episode? I wasn't here. I've been traveling a lot, having to do
I know,
stuff.
we missed
I was
you.
working with a nonprofit.
We got to do
like
a part two. We got to do part 2 with you. And by the way, that reminds me, Gage just texted me. He's available 2 weeks in April, so maybe that's when we can do a part 2. But Pastor Kinney, gave that wisdom. Sonatas had some good stuff to say. It was good, man, but it was packed into an hour because Pastor Kinney had to leave early. So it was different. We kind of had
those counselors, bro. They got their time limit. He even gave you a counseling time limit.
I know. Right. 1 minute over, he was going to charge me $150.
You've done a lot of different. You've done Christian therapy, psychology therapy. Or do they be pretty strict on those times?
Oh my God, yeah. Oh my God.
Because they start as if they're your best friend, right?
They will literally charge a premium if you go 1 minute over.
Really?
Well, it's not.
So how do they begin to close it? Like if you're in a thought or something and you're in therapy, how do they, if you're coming to your 1 hour in, how do they?
It's pretty much like, that's enough of that. Okay.
Oh, really?
Well, no.
Well, they'll say
do
like,
it nicely.
let's end it right here.
They do it nicely. No, they do it nicely. But they're just very, very strict with their time schedules. And I can't can't cancel. They'll still charge me. If I canceled, once they put me in their schedule, like if I try to cancel a minute past when I commit to it, they still charge me.
I think that's great. I mean, I think that barbers should do that, huh, Aaron? I think that I should start doing that. I was really just trying to get to the point that I was like, I think I should start doing that.
As a customer, a client, it keeps me more committed and just more disciplined with making sure that I don't, have excuses if I want to call it off or whatever.
Well, I mean, nobody really values time anymore unless there's a repercussion for it. And
are we talking about counseling appointments?
Yeah. So he said that because, Caleb has done a bunch of types of different traditional therapies. So people don't know, but Aaron came in a little late. So that's why he's catching up. If you're listening to audio, you're like, why did Aaron hear a whole conversation and just decide to jump in? He just got in here in the room is what it is. But I asked him, because he said that this last episode I wasn't able to join him. Pastor Kinney was a part of it, and Caleb said, "Well, we only could go an hour because Pastor Kinney was only available for an hour." I said, "That's just like a counselor to give you an hour timeline." But those therapists, I think that's fascinating. The moment you schedule and put it in the books, if you call back 1 minute later and say, "I can't do it," they're charging you.
Oh, for sure.
That time.
For sure,
that's good. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's their bread and butter. You miss 1 hour, that's 1 hour of their pay, that's like any other workplace. It's just like if someone cancels something, it's like, oh, well, there goes my hour shift. Like, I'm just not getting paid for that.
And we offer free counseling here at ALFC. So I've tried to help people honor my time by doing this on the front end. Let's say somebody starts a counseling appointment. I say, hey, Siri, can you set an alarm for 55 minutes? And that's just setting the expectation on the front end.
Do you really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So then they're talking.
Yeah.
It's minute 55, and all of a sudden you hear music in the background.
It's like a music. It's like subtle. Oscars. It's not like wah.
No, not like that. Not like that.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, dude, you're a jerk.
Yeah.
I was like, I would never.
No, it's just kind of letting them know.
In my head, I was like, next staff meeting, go through everyone's counseling approach. No, I like that little subtle music. I just tend to. I don't know what I do. I'm trying to think how I end counseling appointments in my head.
Because they're so hard to end if you don't set expectations on the front.
Yeah, and when the person really starts getting going and getting deep into their what they're going through and stuff, it's it can be tough cutting it short.
Well, I think kind of the beauty is like traditional forms of therapy, psychology, psychotherapists, all this stuff. A lot of it is meant to ask you enough questions to help you discover. I mean, self-discovery through question asking.
Yep.
It's a little different to me. If you're going to meet with a pastor, people are tending most of the time to kind of get more of a black and white answer, and depending on if it's totally chemical imbalance or stuff that takes a lot more weeding out. But if it's just simple stuff like, hey, I feel distant from God, or that type of stuff like that, you could kind of tend to be a little more black and white. Like, hey, here's some resources. Here's some scriptures I encourage you to reflect. Right. Here's some habits I encourage you to get involved to. And then you can, because I don't think my counseling appointments really necessarily go an hour anymore. I think I'm kind of like 30 to 45 minutes is where I'm at. And then if we're doing like married couples, then we'll just kind of tend to land the plane towards the end and just say, hey, this is how me and Ashley have, seen our success. And
right.
I want you to work on some of those things, and you can let us know next time you want to meet. I enjoy them. I think because we tend to have our social. This is what I've seen over the years, because I've been in a pastoral role for 12 years now, probably counseling for 10, whether it be youth, children, adults, couples, all that stuff like that. What I've seen most over the years changed is there has been, because I've been counseling since social media wasn't really a big impetus. So, but now I tend to see this big desire that even when you're counseling someone, they have a desire to have this false face that they even want you as the pastor or counselor to perceive them as. Like you have to break through that falsehood, that false narrative of social media face of, I got it. Because I've done counseling, said like, well, I do that. I've done that. And then I'll be like,
well, that's where asking good questions comes in.
Yeah.
Because I don't pride myself in having the right answers, more so that I pride myself in asking the right question.
Yeah.
I think that's much more of a valuable skill.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where that comes in, as far as like asking good questions to really expose the real person.
For sure.
And
we'll break it down in time. But over the years, like earlier on, it would be, we spend 5 minutes of that kind of, oh, okay, I'm going to put my wall down and I'm going to let you see. Now it's like, we're in it 40 minutes.
For sure.
Right.
And we're still cracking the code at breaking that wall, and we'll get there. But this idea this idea that's been enlarged.
Oh, you're just saying people have changed a little bit with social media and just how they interact on their day. They're more walls up. They have more. They're more guarded. They have more walls up. They have more
guarded
masks and personalities.
Which takes more time from a counseling perspective to weed through the layers. There's just more layers.
Yeah.
I
hear you. I misunderstood you. Yeah,
like less and less places.
I'm not saying they're not talking at all.
Right.
Which would definitely be a reflection of me more than him.
No, I hear you. Yeah.
I think to Adam's point, I think with social media, people are finding less and less places where they can be authentically themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are deceived on, okay, this is my real self. No, there's still performance in that.
Yeah, man, it was refreshing. I did a counseling appointment a couple of weeks ago, and the person within just the first couple of minutes was just like, yeah, man, I think I just suck in so many areas. It was like a young man, and he's just like, yeah, I feel like I need a father figure in my life. I feel like I need to make better decisions in it was very refreshing of like, I didn't, we asked a couple questions, but really early on, it was almost like, I'm not going to give you this kind of fake side of me. I'm just going to tell you like it is. I'm not good at making decisions. I'm not good. And I was like, man, this is nice. And then the counseling appointment ended and they recapped me like a week later and was like, hey, so here's all the homework you gave me. I did it. I talked to this person. I did this thing. And I was like, man, that's refreshing, because usually it takes a lot
I feel
longer.
like most people don't have people in their lives that genuinely care to listen to them. Most people talk in order to have their own opinion expressed, if they ask questions or, it's very rare to have a person that is genuinely interested in you. You know how that feels like when somebody like just really wants to listen to you talk, and they're not just trying to ask you something so that they can give their opinion. That's, and I think that's where the value of counseling comes in.
I definitely think more people than ever need it in just that aspect. Like there may not be anything really super wrong than you, with you, but if you don't have community, you don't have friendships, and you don't have anyone that can hear the words come out of your mouth, then having some type of counselor is good just for that. Like, don't even got to explore medication or anything like that. Just be like, I don't have anyone that I can talk out loud to, and they listen. Everyone I'm talking to is bidding to add their own voice or their own opinion. And I think that I think one great thing is from the last episode we did when we were doing our Beyond the Letter questions, and we were supposed to answer 10 and we got through one and talking about generational curses. But to me, like, I got a lot of DMs from people that were just like, that conversation in a whole, I don't even know if I'm going to meet with my parents, but it really helped me heal. You know, like just hearing you guys talk was enough for me to be like, I'm not alone, you know, I'm not alone, or, hey, maybe I do need to just release this thing. And then others were like, no, I'm my parents live somewhere else. I'm setting up something to go talk to them and just be able to have this conversation and stuff like that. So I think that kind of stuff is cool. And I think that's where these long form podcasts help people to be able to hear other people talk, you know, and that's what's crazy to your point. You just said, like, if you really think about how many conversations you're in that aren't weather related, sports related, you know, or whatever, like, there's not a lot of them. You know, there's not a lot of conversations going on, or in your own political spectrum of who you follow on social media and stuff like that. And I mean, it's crazy how that just doesn't really exist that much anymore, which is pretty cool. And I was just recently at a thing, and, you know, I've said I live by your motto that I recognized a long time ago. You were really good at is that you're really good at, Caleb. You're really good at being in a room and no one learning anything about you, because you asked them so much about themselves that they forgot. Oh yeah. They forget to even ask you anything about you. Right. And so I was recently at a thing where obviously I've lived by that for many years now. And it was pretty cool that, I mean, I didn't say that in a room, hey, this is what I try to do. Mm-hmm. But, we went around a room and was just like, hey, what impact does each person make? And it kind of came around the summation of that idea of like, he didn't really talk about himself that much, you know, like he asked a lot about other people. Right. And I think there's so much value, in that, in just asking people questions.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems like the higher you get in status in society, leadership, I mean, there's one thing we've noticed, but typically, like, the higher you get in positions of leadership or status, whether that's a business or whether that's a church ministry, you see a lot of it, but you get less and less of that, like just that, the desire for that leader or that person of influence to really be interested in you. It's just more about them and their ego and talking about themselves. And, you know, I've noticed that, and it's just, you know, it's just kind of like, that's a temptation kind of when you get to these high statuses to genuinely, like, you just care about yourself. You just care about what you're doing, and you just care about your life and your advice. And it's like, well, you know, the people below you have just as valuable insight into the world and into life. And, you know,
I think the higher you go in leadership, it just becomes more complex because less and less people are telling you no.
Right.
Less and less people are telling you how they really feel. So I think as a leader grows, that leader has to seek that out more.
Yeah, self-awareness is tough. Yeah, when you get into higher places of leadership, whether you have a staff or whether you have a platform or a face, like self-awareness is probably the hardest thing, you know, that you can have. It was pretty cool. And then the room I was just referencing, I was at, it was just, you know, it was 10 for 10. Everybody was humble, which was rare because they all had very big platforms. And literally every person in that room, you would say, that is a humble guy. Where I've been in a lot of rooms where you're like, wow, these guys really, they want to be, you know, they have valuable voices, a valuable platform, but you could tell they want it. Like, they want it so bad, and they're willing to do anything to have it. It's refreshing when you're around people who have influence and impact, but have a genuine state of humility about them and are learners and do ask people questions and care about people. That, I mean, that's definitely not common, you know, today.
So speaking on leadership, I know there's plenty of books and videos, but in your perspective, and I'm going to speak in the lens of ministry. So when you are trying to recruit and maintain volunteers or a small staff, what are some qualities that you say, hey, these are 3 or whatever qualities that as a leader is good to have when you're recruiting and you're trying to maintain this volunteer or your small staff that you have? Is it is it like, what are some qualities or things that you would say?
I mean, I think some of those is, probably one of the biggest ones would be leading by example. I mean, that's probably like a very common one, but it's pretty rarely done. And so, people are, and you don't have to lead by example by literally doing what everyone is doing, but the amount of care and work ethic has to be in the context of whatever your role is. And so, I wouldn't necessarily say like if you're a CEO of a company and I wouldn't say, well, hey, you need to be setting up chairs too, because everyone would say, well, do you know how much that CEO of the company gets paid? Like that's actually bad stewardship. He shouldn't be setting up chairs, right? Because it's like he should be running the company. Yeah. So it's not the sense of you should literally be doing what everybody's doing, but it's in the sense that as much as you're asking other people to sacrifice, as much as you're asking other people to work and to be involved in, they have to be able to see that it's coming from the same sense of you. So in other words, if everybody's setting up chairs and yet you're sitting here and then you got your coffee and then you got a friend next to you or you got a coworker next to you that you brought and you're talking while everyone's sweat. Well, yeah, I mean, that's poor leadership. You're not leading. But if you're preparing something or you're doing something else that's in your role while everyone's working and it's perceivable and it's seeable and people see that you're coming on time, you don't come late, you don't, that's the stuff to me that people just are looking for and perceiving in a leader. Do they lead by example? As much sweat equity as they're asking us to put? Because sometimes what a leader will be like, oh, I gave that sweat equity. Now I'm in a role of leadership. Now I don't have to sweat as much because I got other people doing it for me. That's where to me that like leadership becomes really, really toxic and really errant. And then I think additionally, I mean, how I've tried to build it over the year is in authentic relationships. Yes. So you have to really care for the people that are with you. No one is a means to anything. Yes. So to me, for many times, depending on what a person's role is, the people is the mission. So if we're putting on an event, the people that I'm serving with, the people that I'm working with, they are my mission. The event is secondary. So in that moment, I'm there for them and I'm there with them and I care about them and we're building relationship. Whatever we're doing right now, getting ready for, like that is a secondary aspect of it, you know? So for me, like when me and my wife directly led like a service on a Sunday night, we had 180 volunteers on our roster and all that. Like we celebrated birthdays. We brought out birthday cakes. We did fire pits. We did, we just did, we did as much. And then I still had to preach, but it's like, you balance that. And so sometimes my wife would go out and she would do the rally while I would go finish my notes or whatever it was. But that was a season where it was extremely relational for us because it needed to be, because we had to roster 180 volunteers every Sunday to put on an event. And it was very authentic for us. We did roller rinking with people. We did, people at our house. I mean, that relationship when people want to thrive with you and they feel like you care. I mean, people not only enjoy it, but they'll go far with you and for you,
Yeah, that's good.
So those are some of the things I've seen. You could go more into like the leadership, but I mean, any of us could, and just go into the anecdotes.
And it's important to distinguish, like we're talking about church volunteers, which takes a different kind of form. Like these are people who are already working 40 hours a week and they're volunteering their time.
For sure.
They're volunteering extra time for free to volunteer, whether it's an outreach center, whether it's an event or so on and so forth. Yeah. And so I think as the leader, always have a positive attitude, never show negative emotion, always be optimistic. because these people are here for free.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and so if they see you as a leader, you know, a negative
Grumpy.
or grumpy, they'll be like, well, you know, why am I doing this? Like my own leader is having a miserable time. Why am I here sacrificing my free time to do this? You know,
I've always felt that a great leader is a master of two tools, the heart and the hammer. And a person that can wield both the heart and the hammer, because there are seasons where a hammer is used to build, a hammer is used to progress. The heart is meant to listen. The heart is meant to care. Yeah. And I've met a lot of leaders, and to me, it goes into even for-profit companies and stuff like that, is I met a lot of leaders who are pure heart. Mm-hmm. And then just, what's the matter? Come talk with me. You know, like, just everybody's always whining. Everybody's always complaining. And that leader's always giving an ear and just, oh, yeah, I feel you. You know, and then it's always blaming someone up top. It's like, yeah, well, I just, you know, like, there's a recent preacher I heard who was apologizing for God, you know, on stage. And they said, I wish God was another way. For me, I'm cool. You know, I'm cool. You know, it's like, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, that's a leader who's in that moment pure heart. Like, what do you mean?
He
like,
just doesn't want to offend anybody.
Yeah, you don't want to offend it, and therefore God is the enemy of this story. And yet you're saying, hey, if it were me, if I were God, I would do this a different way. Would you? Like, borderline heresy, my friend. You know, like, so that to me is pure heart, and so that can get you in trouble. But then on the flip side, if you're pure hammer, you come in and it's just, I'm building people and I'm building leaders and I'm building this and I'm building that, and you got, you know, we would say in the leadership space, you have a trail of dead bodies.
Yeah.
So you got what you wanted. You built what you wanted. You got, you know, cool. You got the platform. You got followers. If you're at a for-profit company, you got the raise. You got whatever you got. You wanted. But look at that trail. It's like the trail of tears. Look at that trail of dead bodies behind you. And so to me, going to your point, Caleb, it's like, if volunteers, or if you're in a for-profit space and you management, you have people under you, great leadership does take heart and hammer. People should respect what you're trying to accomplish, what we're striving for. Right. There should be a sense of excellence, and there should be a sense of honor in what you're doing and who you're doing it with, which to me is a hammer. It's building. It's uncomfortable. You have to have uncomfortable conversations. I mean, when I had those 180 volunteers, and I've been a children's pastor and we had 500 volunteers, I mean, there were tough conversations we had to have because we were building something.
Right.
But we had the heart to say, I love you, what's going on in your family, what's happening in your life, happy birthday, all that stuff like that. That's the heart. And you have to do them both.
Yeah.
Intentionally. I wouldn't say you have to do them, you should do them well, but that may be easier or harder for people depending on where they're at in their leadership. But you should strive for both, is to me what it is. And I always try to dialogue when I'm talking to someone. What do they need right now? What tool do they need? Do they need the heart or do they need the hammer? Do I gotta dig in a little bit, or do I need to just get up and give him a hug? You know, like where am I at right now? What do I have to do?
I think what
they need, not necessarily what they want, because a good leader has to have the courage to say, I have to give you this. But then it's to answer Nancy's question, to complement what you guys both said, the leader has to look at the long game and be long suffering. So if you're like the point that you talked about with volunteers, if everything's for free, people will stop showing up, and we got to pay attention to why.
Yeah.
So some of the language that we use in our Pomona campus is, I care about your soul more than I care about you serving. Because if we only make it about the task, when the task is done, what's next?
What's next?
So what I've told my leadership team is, grab your cell phone, and I want you to put yourself in the emotion of your volunteer when you call them. What are they thinking? Are they thinking he wants something from me? She wants something from me? Or, oh, that's my leader. Oh, I wonder how they're doing it. So it's just always wanting something for people, not from people. So if going back to what you said, Pastor Adam, about the self-awareness, if we really take the time, we would know if our team respects us, if our team honors us, what people really think of us, and if we want to take the time to change that. So the long-suffering part is, seasons, like in certain seasons, people won't be at their best.
Yeah.
And they'll need that heart, but they'll also need that hammer to be built up to what success looks like. So knowing what they need at that time and having the courage to do it, not to be liked, but to be respected.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you got like, I think what you said was cool was like, and like the way I heard it was like having vision. People follow vision, and so if vision is minimal, or vision is like, well, we'll see, and we're gonna give it our best college try, or whatever it is, instead of saying like, hey, here's our vision. You paint the picture, you paint the dream. Like, I know people that have, I know people that work at Meta. I know people that work at other companies, and when you go there, they don't just say what they're doing. They'll say, hey, our goal is to get 1 billion people on our platform.
Mm-hmm.
Well, where are you at right now? We're at 700 million or whatever, right? It's like, oh, okay. Like they're always regurgitating a vision of what are we doing? What are we building? Why are we here?
Mm-hmm.
And some of it is reachable. And then some of it is just to the stars, so that people could continually believe and have faith and know like, oh, this is what we're doing. This is what we're striving for, rather than, hey, if you've ever finished a video game or something like that, and it was just totally anticlimactic, or some of these great movies or TV shows at the end of the season, I think that's how they said was Game of Thrones was like greatest series of all time, or one of them. And then I heard like the last season or something was just like oh man, that was a bummer.
Yeah.
I didn't see it, but that's just what I had heard online. And I think, you begin to drop off in your leadership is as the climactic moments come. If people go, oh, that was it?
Yeah. What's
okay,
next?
well, all right. Well, I'm going to go look at doing something else, rather than the vision and what we're doing and what people are doing is exciting, whether you're in a church space or a for-profit space.
Yeah.
And it has to be realistic. Like,
sure.
We're in a church space, so we do believe we're changing people's lives, and we can measure that. We can measure that as, hey, these people were going to be getting a divorce and they're no longer, or these people were going through mental illness and here they are.
Right.
But I'll go to a place and it's like a candy company, and they're like, we're changing lives, and you're like, the vision should match the reality of what it is that you're doing, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
so the right language is so important. Also, and not just throwing a false hope out there, because at some point people wake up and they go, wait, we're giving people cavities. Are we changing lives? Like, are we really changing lives? Rather than we're bringing people joy.
Yeah.
If I had a candy company, we're bringing people childhood. Okay, that makes sense. And here how we measure that, or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
So to me, the vision has to match the practicality of what the accomplishment is. And I've heard that with when I've talked with like Richard, who's over our maintenance and janitorials, like he doesn't necessarily use language like when he's talking to the janitors or maintenance, we're changing lives, because he practically knows that a clean space isn't necessarily going to change a life. But what he will use language is like, we're easing people's day by coming into a space that's clean and a place that's sanitized.
Mm-hmm.
And so that person with all their stress is that much more less stressed because of our it's like, oh, that's a grasp. I can grasp that vision in relevance to what it is that we're doing, and that can keep me going,
Right.
And so that language of and I think you have to do that as a family.
Yeah.
I think that translates into the home as well, of like, for me and what are we doing here? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying, our boys, as they grow up, what is it that they can hold to as a family value and a vision that's realistic, that's something that can keep them going, connected in the family and in the home. And so I think it translates into a lot of different spaces, personal, family, work, all that stuff like that.
Yeah, going back to the self-awareness that you talked about, a leader has to understand people will be interested in you, but they'll be committed to a vision. Mm-hmm. So just because you're compelling, just because you're a great speaker, doesn't mean that somebody will commit to something that you're building. Yeah. But if you declare the vision and their gifting or their calling can now grasp onto that vision, now you got somebody that you can roll with.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if they're showing up for you, well, then when you're not around, it's like, oh, Aaron's not around. He holds this whole place together with his energy and his personality.
Right. So then that's poor leadership on my part. For trying to make something on a personality instead of a vision. So the vision's always going to be bigger than the leader.
Yeah.
So God will give people a vision, and then it's like, man, I don't know how to do those things. But then you know how to rally people around you declare that vision, now the gifting sprout up on
Yeah.
how we can roll together on that.
My wife always tells a story, and it makes me laugh. She was, she was really, a lot of us know she was a very gifted soccer player. So, almost every college in the nation was trying to get her to play for them. So she said there was a team of a very prominent, famous D1, and the coach was heavy, and he was like coming at her, trying to recruit her senior year. Come play on my team. I'm going to be there. I'm going to coach you. I'm going to develop you. I'm going to be there with you your whole 4 years. This is what I do. I care about this university. I care about these girls. You come with us. Well, Ashley ultimately decided to go to another university. So he calls, because during that time, like, he was inviting her to clinics and camps. He's like, I wasted my time on you. He's yelling at her now. Well, come to find out, 6 months later, during that whole time, he was interviewing for another university. And so by time her season started at the other college she chose, he wasn't even the coach anymore. Yeah. And she said, if I would have built my hope on that guy being present, because that's what his sell. It wasn't the sell of the team. It was, I'm going, and he was a very famous coach. So he's like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be here. I'm going to personally develop you. I'm going to get you into the pros. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And he was full of it. Mm-hmm. And so I think, because I think sometimes as leaders, we do that too. Like, hey guys, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to always be here. This and that. And if you don't mean that, and you're just saying that to sell people to do what you need to do in the moment, and not care about them in the long run. Because Ashley had always told me, if I would have believed that guy, I would have been so crushed. Mm-hmm. If I signed up and he left because the coach that came in was not a well-known coach, and the team didn't do good all those 4 years because she ended up going to Florida and had all these national championships. She's like, I would have lost my career. Mm-hmm. I would have lost my hope in trusting people as leaders to be like, this guy lied to me. This guy played me. He wasn't there for me. She goes, he just wanted to hit his recruitment quota. Mm-hmm. And he just wanted to get, the bonuses you get for getting the right players and recruitment. And then he was going to take that other job, bigger pay, wherever else, and say, okay, bye girls, And I think if that's what whoever, himself or the Lord, would want him to do, cool. But the falsehood would have been, the wrong part would have been in him saying, this is what I promise I'm going to do. And I'm not going anywhere. And I'm going to see your 4 years. That's where the error is. And so I, over the years, have tried to take that permanence language out of me, because that's what people will hold on to. Mm-hmm. It's like, Adam's not going to always be here. Because over the years, I'd been moved around in ministry. So I've been a children's pastor, youth pastor. I've been a creative pastor. I've been a young adult pastor. And if every season I was like, guys, I'm not going nowhere. I'm going to see it through. And then, he's the creative pastor. I thought he wasn't going. And people will hold you to that.
For sure.
And then they'll be discouraged by it. So now I just say, however the Lord will have me, just know that I'm committed, I'm available, I'm here, and should God want me to, however long God wants me to be in this role, I'll be committed until he says otherwise, add them caveats.
Yeah, that's true. And I think you showed an example this week, Pastor Aaron, where, we're in a season of Easter. So everything is like, boom, boom, boom. We need it now. We need it here. And you literally just stopped all of us and was like, I just want to say thank you. Like, it's our job. We get paid to do what we do. So you don't need to hear that, but it's nice to, to the simple things. Like, it literally took like 20 seconds. Thank you. Let's go around the table. Boom, pray out. So I think those little things go a very long way, because it just shows like, man, like, somebody appreciates, and like I said, not that we need it, but it's just nice for when a leader actually shows that appreciation.
Yeah, definitely. So. Well, I would flip it. I would say that that teams need it, but it shouldn't be mandatory or it shouldn't be necessarily expected. Mm-hmm. But I think we all need appreciation in some shape or form. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to be able to see what each person's language of appreciation is. Mm-hmm. But I get what you're saying. Good. You're like saying, hey, you didn't have to do it or whatever, which is true. I mean, it's true. But I do think everyone needs appreciation. Yeah. Everyone needs to know that they're valuable. And it could be like, I do it I mean, I wasn't really, and me and my dad have talked about this over years. Not only is my dad, but he's been my boss for many years.
Yeah.
And he is the last person that gives, he stops, but this is for himself.
Yeah.
I mean, this is in his own life. He never got it. He never received it.
Yeah.
And then he's always pushed through it. So he has never heard thank you. He's never heard a high five. He's never heard encouragement. So he doesn't give it in that way. Well, no, what he does is he gives people, raises, bonuses, more positions, the more he trusts you and the more he leaves you alone, that is his form of, I appreciate you so much because he ain't talking to you.
Not on you.
If he's not talking to you, then
You're
he
good.
appreciates you. If you start meeting with him, like if you start meeting with him on the regular, then this is like, okay, hey, my appreciation is waning. And now, it's like, so I've had to learn him over the years that it's like the less questions he had on a budget, the less questions he had on a requisition meant I appreciate you and I trust you. And I had to read that. And sometimes I had to say, hey, is there a reason why you don't give a high five? And he'd say, man, thanks for reminding me I haven't done, because he just never received it. So then he'd give it in return, or we'll give him nudges, over the years, because I've been with him now. I'd nudge him. I say, hey, so-and-so did a great job at this. And so just, if you give him a high five, and he'll be like, oh, okay, yeah. Because it's just, that's not his mind doesn't reflect in that way. So to me, you have to put good people around you. I mean, that's where, I filled in with him over the years to be like, hey, just, give so-and-so when you walk by their desk a high five. They really killed it at this. He's like, oh, okay. It's not his language, but what is in his language is, hey, Aaron, her Pomona's going great. I need you to go up to our retreat center and meet this guy in construction. It's like, and you're like, but I don't have anything to do with that retreat center. But it's his way of saying,
I trust
you're
you.
killing
So
it. You're killing it. I
what
trust
I've
you.
learned is you're doing good. What I've learned is you're doing a good job if you get more responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing a good job if you get an extension of trust.
Mm-hmm.
So Pastor Diego hasn't said, Aaron, you're doing a good job in Pomona.
Yeah.
But I don't expect that, because I heard him saying another conversation. He was like, did you hear what's going on in Pomona? They're self-sustaining. And I was like, we are? But in my leader's mind, he's not worried about Pomona. That was the affirmation I needed.
Yeah.
Or
if he started coming around every day at 6 a.m. and doing a walkthrough,
then it's like, but for some leaders, it's like, oh, he really cares. No.
Yeah.
He doesn't trust your
He's
leadership.
worried.
He doesn't trust your judgment.
He's worried.
Yeah, your job's on the line. Why is he here every day?
Yeah. And I think we all can learn and be better in so many different ways. The time.
It seems the bigger the organization, the leader is more type A, the leader is more alpha. The leader is just more of a take charge savage in that sense. The bigger like I doubt Jeff Bezos is giving words of affirmation. He's probably similar to Dad. He's probably similar to. So I think I don't think Trump is giving. He probably acts the same way Dad does. Like if he likes what you're doing, he'll just raise you to a higher position.
Yeah.
So whereas you have more mom and pop type businesses, they are going to have to be more affirmative. Probably when we were a lot smaller, he was more affirmative towards the people around him.
I mean, I get your point you're making.
I'm just saying, probably not. But I'm just, but no. This is what I mean, though. But he had to take. He had to be more relational. He had to be more relational. He had to take more people on lunches, more people on,
that was the season.
More parties. I remember we went to a lot of parties in the earlier days. A lot of Super Bowl parties with random church members. Birthday parties, of after church. Every Sunday after church, we went out to dinner with a new church member. Yeah, and so it was very relational. And then as we grew bigger and bigger, we did less of that. We did.
But I believe a visionary leader does that to train others to do it so it can multiply.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Yeah.
So I think it's a natural. I think it's great. Yeah. But as we grow, kind of like what Pastor Adam was saying earlier, if you're the CEO, then you've built leaders that now you've put that DNA in them to do.
Yeah.
And now it
grows. And I'm more so talking in an employment sense. I'm not talking about like building a church or anything like that, because he understood the nature of what it took to build a church. But as a leadership employment and boss and all that kind of stuff like that. Because even when he was doing those social things, I mean, there were still, volunteer days or leadership days. I mean, the way that you would think someone's supposed to receive affirmation, that's not the way he would give it. He wouldn't give it to the volunteers. He wouldn't give it in that sense. He would just say, hey, bro, I see you doing that one thing as ushers. Can you lead our men's thing?
Yep.
It just, that was his form of like, and he's always been that way. He's understood relational and relationship, but in the way that we would say, because I think the problem is people get so stuck in one specific anecdote.
Yes.
This person needs to come to me and tell me, thank you, you are doing a great job. That is the one anecdote of but there are a lot of ways.
And that's why that's why I widened the tent, because like for me, I am not a word guy. Like I'm not like you. Like you appreciate and you notice the lack of it with our dad being affirmative. I'm the opposite.
Okay.
I don't like it. I feel uncomfortable when somebody gives it, and it didn't produce any trauma in me whatsoever having a dad that didn't affirm me. But that's not my love language, if you want to say it like that. It's not.
Well, that would be a form of trouble. The fact that you don't like it.
No. What I'm saying is, and it goes back to my personality disorder. But here's what I will say. Like I appreciate it. Like I appreciate when people compliment me. I do, but it's not like it's uncomfortable for me. It's not like I feel good about it. I appreciate it. It means something to me. Right. But I kind of feel awkward. I kind of feel uncomfortable. Whereas for me, my thing is sitting down with me and having a meaningful conversation beyond the weather and beyond sports and beyond the humdrum. Like let's talk about some deep subject, and you spend 30 minutes with me talking about some deep subject, or just talking about like asking me about my kids or my wife and like some deep meaningful aspect about that. That's like what I will be like, oh man, he never did that to me. Like this guy jacked me up, or I'm leaving. I'm not appreciated here, or whatever. Yeah. It's more along those lines. But yeah, I mean,
that's where me and my dad are similar. Like we don't want a 30-minute conversation with anyone.
Exactly. That's why going back to counseling, like I'm the guy that's going to be in the sanctuary with that same person until midnight, because I can't cut it off until they're ready to cut it off. Yeah. I'm in that conversation. I'm in that vibe, and we're I'm riding this wave until they say that they're done. Yeah. And like time just doesn't exist for me when I'm having, now if we're talking about like something like sports, I'm just like, oh God, shoot me. But if it's like something, right? So yeah, I mean that's
if it's weighty thing. But that's why I think like to me that's the strength of it, is like I don't think as a leader I mean, if you have a small enough team, you should try to make the effort to understand what each person needs and try your best to fill those things. But in the sense of like, I don't think it's necessarily a leader's job to be able to be bilingual in the sense of how I need to.
Oh, for sure.
And I think it's the awareness of a person to be able to understand from that leader now, if there's just a leader who's just unappreciative of anyone or anything and they just use people, well, yeah, they just, people aren't never going to truly, come around them or appreciate them or whatever, follow them. But in the sense of, okay, if it's a leader who leads well, people clearly follow, people clearly understand vision, people clearly want to be a part of what they're doing. Well, now I want to understand, how do they show appreciation? I mean, that's it. Because, I remember one time someone told me they were on staff and they were leaving, and they said, part of the reason, I'm leaving is, you never discipled me. It was a person who was older than me, like by like 6 years, and not that age had anything to do with it, but in me, it was been part of it, like been in the church a long time. So I told them, like, did you want me to disciple you? And they're like, I don't know. I mean, Like it would have been not. And when they met a discipleship setting, have me over your house, how I see you doing with all those young adults where you're, going through the Bible with them and you're having Bible studies and this and that. Like you never brought me to it and this and that. And I'm thinking, so I told them, had you ever asked me to disciple you?
Mhm.
Well, no. I said, so you want me to walk around as a leader and be like, you need to be discipled by me, Aaron. Like,
Right.
what would that communicate? I just told them, think about, but they had gotten so hard-hearted because their expectation of me, without me even knowing. And so then every choice I made, if I ever invited people to my house, if I ever did, they're thinking to themselves, why? And I said, because that person has asked me to be their mentor.
Right.
That group of individuals or group of men have asked me to help them in their weaknesses. That's why they're at my house. Have you ever asked me to do that? No, I haven't. So it's this idea of these unrealistic expectations set on a leader. Now, if he came to me and said, hey, Adam, will you mentor me, be available or this or that? Then it is on me to either point them in the right direction or welcome them. That is the way. But I have seen over the years,
Yeah.
and I work a lot in the corporate space as well, and I'll talk a lot of times to employees concerning their managers or the founders and stuff like that, and they'll sometimes use language like that of this idea of, I'm expecting our CEO or our founder does not do blank, and I'll say, well, that's a kind of rare expectation. Where did you see that?
Yes.
Did you see that on a LinkedIn thing? Did you see that on a TikTok? Did you read that in a book? Where did this thing come from that the leader is supposed to do?
Yeah.
Didn't your leader take your whole team to Disneyland?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that was to thank us for our Q1. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's their form of appreciation. It's like, but I want them to tell me, I want them to come and tell me, thank you. They just spent $150,000 thanking all of you guys.
But that's the thing. That's why my personality type, I would never be a leader of some huge organization, because they're wanting like this small business, small church dynamic. When there's a different, this is, you have people that will only attend small churches. You got a lot of people who left our church once we started getting really big and it became less of like this family feeling. And so you just have people, those are those types of people. They want that one-on-one affirmation, but I feel like it's unreasonable once you get to a certain level of success in a business or in a church or in a whatever.
Yeah.
That's never the case when you have a CEO or a boss that's personally like you, employee number 150. You did so amazing when you did this, and this. I mean, who does that?
And I think there are some founders who do it, but it's very rare in that case.
Yeah.
And I think it's because we've fallen for stuff. But I also think that you get what you give. And so, to me, a lot of times when I've heard from a person who's not the main leader, hey, this is what I expect. I want the thing. I'll usually ask them, well, usually there's a tier below you. How often do you give that? Because that must mean that's then your leadership style. And there, a lot of times it's coming from a trauma. Like, I've never got it and I'm searching for it, but they don't give it.
Yeah,
they don't give it back the same.
So as your organization gets bigger and bigger, whether it's in the Christian world or not, how do you manage those people who may have an expectation for appreciation in a certain way? Like you talk about being bilingual, like it's almost impossible to cater to, 180 employees' personal needs. So if somebody expects it, how do you manage the expectations of that person?
I would say a leader has to have the courage to tell individuals if they get an expectation projected on them, that's an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah.
Here is how we appreciate employees at the organization. Here's how I personally will appreciate you. But what you just expected is outside of my boundary.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
And or, oh, thank you for that feedback. I'll start including that as appreciation. Yeah. But there has to be freedom of saying, well, that's not how our organization demonstrates appreciation.
Or that's just unrealistic.
Yeah. And so I've always been, I haven't always been in an organization where I was, one of the main leaders. Like when I started in ministry too, I had, 5 bosses over me. And so to me, this is my own personal conviction, and it has gotten me far in life, is I'll immediately think to myself, how easy can I make this person's life? Mm-hmm. If I'm on the receiving end of leadership.
100%.
And so I'm immediately asking myself, what can I do for this person that is my leader to make their life as easy as possible? Because if I do that, then I know if they're a good leader. If they're bad, well, then maybe I got to quit. Maybe I got to go somewhere else. It is the ball's in my court. I can only whine and complain for so long in a toxic environment without going and updating my resume and go searching it out, and I've had bad leaders over me before. But in that sense, to me, I'm thinking, okay, there's a couple things that I would do is I would say, number one, I would ask my leader, if they're not the ones progressively figuring out, I would ask them two questions. In what ways do you show appreciation? Like, what's your language of appreciation? And then how could I appreciate you?
Yes.
They may respond and say, you appreciate me by just doing your job well. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, great, cool. Or it could be, you show me appreciation by, I don't know, whatever. Like, I really like coffee. So, if you ever wanted to bring me coffee, I think that would really show me appreciation, right? But then they'll respond and then they might say, well, the way I show appreciation is by, I micromanage less and less. The more that I trust you, that's one way I show appreciation, right? Or it's, I do the opposite. I begin to micromanage with you because it's just depending on the leader, because I like to bring you in now and I like to spend more time with you so that I can see if you're worthy of coming up the leadership chain with me. Like they may say the opposite. The more I'm involved in your life is the way I'm appreciating you. So to me, that leader changes. And if I'm if you are the leader, will tend to be, if you're in a leader in a big corporation, it's usually coming through, you may show appreciation through clarifying systems and channels. You may show appreciation by investing in certain things, right? Like I know we've done that now in our churches, like for our staff, because we've moved them all out of their offices and stuff like that. Like we have a snack table and a refrigerator that we stock for the staff. We never did that for 25 years in our church, but because we brought our staff to go work in one place, and while we're doing renovations, it's like, well, one way we're going to appreciate them is always have coffee for them, always have snacks, always have drinks.
I feel appreciated.
Yeah. So if you were to ask me, Pastor Adam, how are you appreciating this? I'd be like, well, and you go to like Facebook and stuff like that, they're the same way. They have open fridges, snacks. They don't charge even lunches for their employees because they don't want them to go off site. They want them to be able to stay on site. So to me, you can kind of understand corporately how they're trying to appreciate you. But to me, it's one-to-one. If you have a boss or a manager, it's just dialoguing in those conversations, how it goes up and down. But to me, if I've always been the person who's had the leader above me, I'm really not thinking what can they do for me, because I think that if I make their life easier, they are going to bring they're just, that's the way life works, is if you're a steward of your talents and your things, and you begin to alleviate stresses, you will be brought onto the table. Now abuse comes if, you get brought onto the table and now nothing's changing and you're doing 9 people's jobs and all that stuff like that. But overall, if it's like, hey, you did this very well, we want to give you this. That's what I'm thinking I want. I'm like, I want more. Like, give me more responsibly, because I want to make your life easier. And I have aspirations to grow in this company or to move up. And the only way I'm going to do it is by excelling with what I've been given and making my manager's life easier.
Okay, I want to say something. I want to say something real quick. I want to transition along this lines of leadership, because this seems to be the topic of this conversation.
It wasn't the purpose of it.
Adam was just featured in a magazine, big time magazine,
modeling on the magazine.
And I wish we had it with us, but he did a segment in that magazine. Yeah, Phil, go get it. So okay, let's spend the rest of the time. Then probing some of these topics that Adam covered in this magazine, because I think it transitions well. And so So in this magazine, you're dealing with this is within the church, but it broadens to leadership in general, and specifically the older generation, the newer generation, adapting the newer generation into the life of the church and what that looks like for older leaders. How do they incorporate the younger generations, and so on and so forth. So help us understand kind of some of the things you talked about in that interview, because I think it was really valuable, really wise, and specifically for older leaders that are trying to be relevant to younger generations, Gen Z, millennials, younger.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is when Phil gets the magazine from the offices, we'll be able to open it and refresh the what we talked about. But I think, I mean, the main theme that came of it from the magazine, and I think we're going to have them available for at least our church here soon, but you can find it online too. It's called the AVAIL magazine. I think part of it is what we're seeing more and more is obviously the hiring force, the people that you're going to be hiring in the next 10 years are going to be Gen Z. And then on the tail end of these 10 years is going to be Gen Alpha. And I think that Gen Z has more degrees of separation from any other generation that we've currently had. So between the silent generation, which are people in their 70s and above, the boomers who are in their 50s and 60s, Gen Xers that are in their 40s, and then you have millennials that are in their late 20s to late 30s, and then you got Gen Z. Well, if you take a millennial and you take a silent generation or even a boomer, there are relative things that they relate to and relate on in certain areas. But now with Gen Z, I feel they are furthest in degree of commonality with any of those generations, which means you have to completely.
They're more alien.
Yeah, 100% to us. I mean, and to all of us from millennial and older, like we are, and I'm in a lot of high level leadership circles. I go to a lot of high level leadership conferences, and back in the day when there were conversations of millennials, which I was one in the receiving of the conversation, it was just a lot more of how do we understand millennials? What do they need? Stuff like that.
Right.
This one's like, when you're in more of these leadership meetings, it's literally like, we don't know what we're doing with Gen Z. Like every leader, every employer, and I'm in for-profit companies who are asking that question, and a big conversation is churches, because as you're Corey ran.
Nice little plug.
Yeah, I know Avail's gonna like that plug. So, basically, part of the main, crux of the interview just turned into whatever they titled it, catching and releasing the next generation. How do you? Because historically, you would think to yourself, how do we hire someone and how do we keep them on for as long as possible? And that is the perfect world, because the more that you invest in someone, the more that you train someone, you invested in them. You want them to stay on the ship as long as possible. But with Gen Z, there's this idea of we don't know what we want to do. We don't, we've learned that these 401ks and retirement, isn't something that the older people are loving their packages at the end. And so do I need to get in a company at 20 and work 30 years or 40 years to have a 401k and barely make it? Do I want to wait until I'm 70 to start going on vacation like Dave Ramsey tells me to do? Do I,
pay cash for a house?
Yeah. Can I pay cash for a house?
Wait,
it just. That's it. And I love Dave Ramsey stuff.
I was listening to a podcast as you're on that topic that like the boomers would have gone through 2, maybe 3 jobs in their lifetime before they retire. Now Gen Z, even some millennials, are falling to having gone through 27 to 30 jobs.
Wow.
By the time that they retire.
Yeah.
So the whole podcast was around, how do you invest and pour into somebody who's most likely gonna be hopping on.
What my podcast was about that, you're saying?
No. I was listening to a podcast.
Oh.
Not your podcast. As you're on this topic, I was listening to a podcast.
Well, it shows you didn't listen to my podcast. Or read my magazine, because that's what it talks about.
Yeah. No, it wasn't.
No, it's cool. It's cool, Chelsea. I put a lot of content out there. You guys don't have to consume all of my content.
I have the magazine.
I'm in
at
a
my
lot of
desk.
stuff. AVAIL also did do an interview with me. You can see that podcast as well, which summarizes the magazine.
We're gonna.
Oh, you can link it. Okay.
Yes.
That reminds me when one of these comedians interviewed Tarantino about his book, and Tarantino called him out because he didn't even read his book. He's like,
gosh, don't. Yeah, that'll get you in
bro,
trouble.
you got Tarantino. You better read his book.
Yeah, you better read his book. So, yeah, to your point, Chelsea, from whoever it is that you heard that used my material. No, but yeah, you're right. What is that conundrum? How do I as an employer invest in a Gen Z person that the common data for most millennials, but definitely Gen X and up until they retire, 2 to 3 jobs their whole lifetime. Right now, it's trending. A Gen Z is going to have 30 by time that they retire. So basically, almost if they work for 30 years, almost 1 job a year.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll do 3 jobs in 1 year or whatever, or they're going to have a job with 2 jobs on the side and have DoorDash and Uber and Eats and other, right? So yeah, how do you do that? How do you invest in them while knowing this probably isn't their last stop on the bus? No, and then you also think, well, do we want them to be our last stop on the bus? Because I've also learned that the firing, and I've been let go from a job before. Firing is part of the process of growing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you need to be let go because it's going to cause you to grow in certain areas and cause you. So you also think, or releasing fire, whatever language you want to use. But I have seen people, not just like in our workplace, but in general, like we have a lot of young people and they'll say, I got let go by my job, Pastor Adam. I'll say, well, what could you have done differently? Sometimes it's just a bad employer. Other times it's like, well, I was coming to work late and I was, doing this and well, maybe we shouldn't do that. So it gives them that time, that time of growth. Maybe you shouldn't be coming to work late.
That's what real conversations people have. And as you're talking about like the expectations of appreciation, going back to earlier, I'm listening. My dad's been a firefighter for 29 years for LA City, and they just don't expect my dad's generation just don't expect appreciation in the way that my little sister or even my generation expects it. So you see a lot of people leaving because of lack. Well, I don't feel, they're not thinking, at least a lot of people have conversations with, they're not thinking, how do I make my boss's job easier? They're thinking, what's in it for me? And the moment they don't feel that, they're bouncing. That's where I feel the difference.
And it's what's in it for me now. Not taking the time. So I think in corporate, it takes at least 3 years of plowing before you can see any potential fruit.
Yeah.
So my dad had 1 job for 45 years. So I was working in corporate for 10 years and I wasn't feeling appreciated. So I called my dad and I said, hey, I think I'm going to go to another company. He said, Aaron, you're a new hire.
10 years in.
But that's just different perspective of a generation. But then I take my daughter to lunch 2 days ago, and she's now a manager at Starbucks, and she's talking through her situations with employees. And I'm telling her, hey, the people that you're pouring into are probably going to be gone in 6 weeks. Yeah. So this is their first job. So pour in, but right now just find your leadership voice. Yeah. Just sharpen your skills.
That's really good.
Yeah, but you have high school students, people first year in college and so forth. Yeah. They're going to bounce. Now, Starbucks has great values. We want people to stay, but at the same token, don't put all your chips in someone that's not fully committed anyway.
That's good.
Yeah. And I think that and when in the magazine is featured, the title of it is called Catch and Release for that reason of like, hey, you may be in the responsibility of catching a Gen Z person, and if you're catching, then you're responsible to care. But at some point, you also have to be willing to release, not you personally release, but release their own desires and their own passions. But here's the danger of it that Gen Z is going to have to look out for is you're not always going to be young and you're not always going to be healthy. Mm-hmm. So there's going to come a day where your body's going to work differently, your energy is going to work differently, and you have to personally, your employer's not doing it anymore because you're going to go through 30 jobs. You're going to have to personally be responsible for your retirement. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to be personally responsible for monthly, whatever, if you're an entrepreneur or whatever, you need to be putting money away, whether in the trust funds, whether it be into your own Roth IRA, whether it be into your own form of 401k, but you have to say, oh, I'm putting $300, $400, $500 a month away because I'm going to go through 30 jobs, and usually retirement packages are linked to the jobs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So your retirement becomes fully credited after a certain amount of years. Well, it's usually 25 to 30 years at the minimum. So if you're going to go be a police officer, 25-year minimum. So, but if you're going to go be a police officer for 3 years, and then now you're started your own company while also driving for DoorDash or whatever it may be, that you just left that retirement package. Yep. And whatever's there, you can pull it out after 25 years or whatever, but it's going to be small. It's not enough. Yeah. No. It's not enough of the over $1 million they say you have to have saved if you want to retire.
That's good. So can I do this now for the remaining time? Because I want to...
I love this.
Because I read this and I also listened to his podcast, Chelsea.
Thank you, Caleb.
And so I want to... I'm going to be Charlie Rose right now, and I just want to. There are 3 big quotes.
Okay.
So you can purchase this AVAIL. Where can they purchase this at?
Well, here's the thing: if you go to our church, you can. We have like 2,000 copies, so they're going to be for free for our church here real soon. We just haven't released them yet.
Okay.
But you can go to like avail.com and read it digitally. But we'll have physical copies for free for people in our church.
Okay, excellent. So there are 3 big quotes.
Just like what you said, I just it feels weird when I make it about myself. So we're just thinking about when's the best way to give it away.
Oh, right.
It's like you don't want.
Okay, Diego. Diego. So we have about 3 quotes here.
I should be promoting myself.
We have about 3 quotes here, which I think sum up what you talked about. So I want to focus on this because this is your area of expertise. And so I kind of want to hone in on these things because I think, I think adding specifics and I want to pull out what you like really know. And so the first quote is, leading Gen Z, you have to move from the dictatorship to the democracy. What does that mean?
I love this.
Why do you do what you do?
This is your Jiminy Glick moment.
I know. I've been waiting my whole life to be Jiminy Glick.
6 months. Ask it like Jiminy Glick.
Adam, tell me. You said leading Gen Z, you have to move from the dictatorship approach to the democracy. Why do you feel that way, Adam? Why do you do that?
Okay. All right. Let me answer it with a serious
Those of you who don't know Jiminy Glick, YouTube Jiminy Glick, you'll know who Jiminy Glick is.
Oh, man, we grew up on...
That won't sound as creepy.
Oh, Martin Short, we grew up on Jiminy Glick. So the biggest thing is... what I've traditionally seen in big organizations, and I mean, even smaller ones, but predominantly bigger organizations, was historically that leader is the smartest guy in the room. And so he'll come in and he's just a matter of assigning tasks. And because he's the smartest one, he knows better. Yeah. He's the one. And so it's very dictator oriented. If you come from a church setting, it's very thus saith the Lord. Like, well, God told me. This is what we're doing, and everyone else in the room is just worker bees. There's only one king of the castle. There's only one this and one that, and that was like the 80s, 90s, 2000s. Leadership was based off of that. Go in the room, make sure you have a clarity of the vision, and make sure you have everyone's roles in the sense of you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. No debate. That's what's happening. That's where we're headed. millennials have even been okay with that, like, because we're millennials and we've worked for people like that over the years, the dictators. So we've been okay with that level, but Gen Z just absolutely, their skin crawls with that kind of stuff, because to them, it immediately tells them that they have zero value, they have nothing to add towards this thing, and that they've just been hired to do a job. And so that dictator personality, most guys that I talk to who have that personality, they're having the hardest time in retention of employees or retention of respect from employees. They're going to do what you say to do, but nobody likes you. Nobody's wanting to follow you. So to me, you have to move to a place of democracy where there's an open forum where you are leading still with vision, but people are able to push back. People are able to ask questions. Gen Z's able to say, hey, I've got a great idea. And you pause and say, let's hear it. Man, that is great. Yeah, let's do that. Scratch what I just said. Yep. The better, to me, and I've always lived by the motto, the best idea has to win, whether it's coming from you or not. Whatever the best motive of transportation is, that's the one you got to take. And so you have to have enough space in the room to be able to do that. And to me, it just practically exhibits that, when Aaron was first on the podcast with us, he came in and he saw everyone on our team just doing audio, this and that, all this stuff like that. And Aaron just was like, man, this is a well-oiled machine. And it's like, well, because everyone has a say. Right. Everyone has a say on this podcast.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And for those that don't know, like when we're meeting about our podcast, like it doesn't necessarily just like, we don't walk in a room and everyone didn't just go like, hey, Adam, Caleb, what do we do next? It's like, everyone's just like, hey, here's an idea I had. Here's a direction. Here's this. I didn't like this or this. And so it's enough room in the space that you're still leading. Like to me, I have a vision of what podcast is supposed to do or whatever else I'm doing. In my head, I have a vision, but I have to be able to allow enough people in the room to throw their 2 cents in so that they're going to have buy-in and ownership in what they do. Because usually if it's your idea, you're going to take more responsibility of it, more ownership of it.
Yep.
If it's not your idea, you're like, well, then it's like, I'm just doing what the boss told me. I don't even get what we're doing here. I don't even know why we're doing this. Right. And sometimes you fall into that. So, I mean, mainly that's why you have to move to a democrative sense.
That makes sense.
It's more like collaboration type of mindset.
Yeah, there's a sense of collaboration, but I mean, that's definitely an aspect of it. But a democracy is very different than a collaborative sense, because collaboration means that we're collaborating on one idea or one thought. Democracy is that it may not even be your space, but you're welcomed in to bring your thought. You're welcomed in to bring your aspect of it. And then you also have to be willing to have the responsibility. Like I've had people before say, hey, this was a great idea, something we weren't even thinking of. This is a great idea. And I'm like, that's great. You should own it. And they're like, oh no, I was just throwing it out there because it was a good I'm like, no, if you're gonna own the idea, also gotta be willing. And so to me, the democracy also allows personal responsibility of thought.
Yeah.
Right.
To say, hey, he chose my thought, but I have to see it down the court. Well, are we gonna hire someone for that? No, it's your idea. Make it provable and then we'll hire someone for it. But if it's your idea, run with it and we'll resource it as it grows. That's one of the things I told Jermaine when he first wanted to do stream youth ministry. He's like, what's my budget? I said, nothing until you reach blank, we talk goals. I said, nothing until you do this. Until then, it's a great thought. I'm enabling you to do it, but resource will not come until the work ethic follows, and then it followed. That's what I think the democracy is.
Okay, so the second quote here says, "I grew up with those pastors who were dictators." Oh, this kind of I guess it's kind of the same, dictators, and a lot of those leaders aren't thriving today. Is there anything additional you want to say to that? Because it kind of overlaps with the previous.
I think mainly a lot of the churches and church pastors that are still taking that dictator approach. They're the ones right now most of them are leaving the most dead bodies behind them. They're experiencing the most people quitting and going to other churches, or they're going into the secular career, or that's why you got so many people who, even Gen Z, who are quitting. That's why they're going to go through 30 jobs, because they don't necessarily know what they're looking for, but they definitely know what they don't like.
Yeah.
So what they don't like is this idea of being told what to do without any equity in the conversation. That's one thing they know they're not a fan of. So,
Right.
so a lot of those leaders that that I grew up around and aware of it, that they're still doing that. They're like, dude, my church is half the size now, and our volunteers are like this and like that, and it's like I know in their leadership they do not, because it takes time. A democratic way of leading, it takes time from your schedule. So like if I was doing the dictatorship, I could schedule a meeting with everyone in 1 hour, and I can come in and just shoot off, everyone leave the room and do what you've just been told to do. It only takes an hour. But because I've always kind of led more democratically while still being very stern in my thought and my conviction. They take multiple meetings and multiple hours because you're giving room for everyone to have that space in there. And it takes a lot. And a lot of those guys who are the dictator, their personality type just doesn't even let them do it unless they're willing to go against their personality type and build new habits.
But this goes to what I was sharing with what I appreciate personally is more along those lines. So you are tapping into what kind of my own personal satisfaction in a workplace comes from, and that is just that willingness to collaborate, that willingness to bring people into an office and shoot ideas and not feel like you're the only source of who hears from God.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's, so you are really good in that sense, and you have learned to value that sort of component of leadership.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I think that's
and it's important. I mean, it's important because people then care more. You know, they just they feel that much more involved, invested. Into, because that's how they're not looking for. I think they should be part of it, but they're not really looking for a 401k or retirement. They're looking for, what do I do? How does it bring purpose and value? And secondly is they're also asking how much freedom can I have? They want more freedom than ever. So dictator leaders are going to box people really quick. And usually dictator leaders go, I'm going to reward you with a bigger salary and better 401k or better that. But when you're talking about a generation who literally does not lead in with those levels of importance, then you're literally only going to be able to recruit, older individuals who just really, frankly, aren't sharp. The older you get, your relevancy and your sharpness loses.
Oh,
it does.
I need to cut that. No, I'm just kidding. I just don't know, because I'm thinking about that conversation yesterday. People were getting offended that because we put in our promo for Easter older generations.
Yeah.
People were getting just because it said older.
Someone got mad about it.
No,
but I did tell Phil. What did I say, Phil, on Sunday? I said it should say generation to generation.
Oh,
that's
which
what
we did switch to.
I said someone's going to get mad at the older generation.
Right.
But to me, again, that is a sensitivity.
That's what I'm saying.
Older.
But that's what I'm saying. It's so funny because the older generation. Oh, okay, I'm committing the sin. The older generation, the boomers, the older generation, like, it's funny, like, because they're so. Let me just say this real quick to get this off my chest. Because they're the first ones to be like, oh, these Gen Zs, they
don't take advice.
No, what do they say? They need their safe spaces. They're snowflakes. These Gen Z, they're snowflakes.
They're offended by everything.
But in some ways, like, they're just as emotional. The older generations can be just as emotional. Like, I'm offended because it says older, and I'm not old. I'm not. And so it's like, calm down. Like, you are older. We're just speaking objectively here. Don't get emotional. Don't get offended. But I think it's you just kind of see that double standard sort of thing.
And it used to be the opposite. But like when we were younger, in our early 20s, if you called us the younger generation, we would get offended by that because we would think that you were calling us kids.
Yeah.
But as the older generation getting older and you call them older, they don't like that because they desire to be young, and you need to deal with that. yourself. Like that's a problem.
Right.
That's a personal problem.
Because I will look for. It's like I forget the movie where there's a guy who he believes that his death will be in God's hands, so he's always trying to put his way into death. I forget what movie. It's like a fantasy movie, but every time there's like an arrow being thrown, he tries to stand in front of it, and in the movie it always goes slow, and then someone will come up with a shield, and he'll be like, "Dang!" Like almost like, "Oh, it's not my time." And he says, "I embrace death. The day that I'll die will be God's timing." And so he's always trying to go in front of death.
Right?
Yeah.
Puss in Boots. That was the meaning of the
I don't
story.
get why there's a stigma with being old. I love to say like your
But I
age
think
when
it's new.
people. Okay,
Yeah.
I was gonna say people. I don't understand that. It's a blessing. People don't get to live that.
It's not
age.
historic. It's not been historically that way. Yeah, gray hair has historically been a badge of honor.
Right.
A place.
Right.
Yeah, it's been a place that you own it and you respect it. And someone who's older may say, "Oh, we don't like older because younger people don't respect us anymore or whatever." And to me, manners maketh man. So it's like in the sense of like, if you want respect, you give respect. To me, if someone's older and says no one respects us or no one does this, well, are you doing things worthy of respect?
Yeah.
Are you doing actions worthy of respect? Are you
Yeah.
being respectable? Because the way you talk about people and to people is going to reciprocate in that way. And so, I recommend, because I'm marketing savvy. That's why I said, it should be generation to generation. I know someone's going to get mad by the older generation thing, but I also thought the loudest noise would come from the younger generation. But I don't think Gen Z really care about being called young. We did when we were younger. But I think they're like, yeah, we're young and we're cool and we're hip. And we're better than you guys. Like they have that vibe. Yeah. Where we never had that vibe. We had the vibe growing up, and I think Eric agreed too. Was like, I want to be older as fast as possible.
Yeah.
I want to be. I want the big house as fast as possible. And we knew that came with age. Mm-hmm. We knew that came. Yeah. Now it's like the younger person's like, I want to stay young as possible. Mm-hmm. Big house as possible, and vacations as fast as possible.
Soon as possible.
Yeah. Very different,
Yeah, great point. So boomers, stop being snowflakes. No, I'm just kidding.
We have great boomers that watch the podcast too. Boomers. Older people, and they are so. They're so relevant,
so receptive.
Well, and they're so cool, and they're so relevant. Like the older people that watch our podcast, and I think honestly, this podcast makes you young. Like.
My favorite people are boomers, but because people have always called me an old soul, even when I was in my teens, and so I
dress like an old soul.
I always couldn't wait to get gray hair and be like 10 years from my death. And just be like this old man, like just
literally what I tell my wife.
Giving advice to whippersnappers and just peace.
Yeah, if you're older, I think you should embrace that gray hair.
Yeah, man,
just be cool. Just be smooth with it. I got grandkids. I got great gang. I'm cool. Like be cool with it. I can't wait
to be a grandma.
Don't try. Right. And I think my dad says that all the time, like where he said, I finally realized being old is cool, and I'm good. I'm good being old. Because he wanted to be young, feel young so long. He's like, I'm good with being old. And I'm
watch the new Puss in Boots, man. It has a great lesson about that.
Oh,
the new Puss in Boots
was incredible.
So the final quote. We'll wrap things up with this final quote. Okay.
To wrap it up, watch Puss in Boots.
Have you guys not seen it?
I haven't seen the new one.
No,
you gotta
It'll
watch
change your life.
Yeah, it'll change your life. It's on level with Toy Story.
Movie?
It's pure metaphysics. No, it's Pixar.
Okay.
DreamWorks.
Right.
No, not Pixar. DreamWorks.
Yeah, it's about life, valuing life.
Don't correct me, Corey. I'm a dictator. Don't you ever correct me on my podcast, Corey.
Where's Corey?
So we want to endeavor to be transformational and not necessarily relevant.
Yeah, it's a good quote.
Do you need context for that?
No, I know the context.
Okay.
I know the context.
Right.
Yeah, because he asked the interviewer asked me, however he asked it, but it was, and this is a big conversation always amongst church leaders, like, how do we stay relevant? What do we do to be relevant to get people in the front door? And I think relevancy is like a dog chasing its tail. It's just like there's always going to be new and relevant stuff. There's always new music and new apps and new all these things. And so I'm not ever sitting in a room or sitting in my home as I'm dreaming, envisioning how to reach people. I never think to myself, how do I have to be relevant? What can I do to be relevant? I think to myself, how can I utilize whatever is relevant to be transformational? And if it can't be transformational, because what I'm in the business of is helping people discover the purpose, grow in their relationship with Christ, help their lives change in the way that they want to be changed in terms of growing their relationship with God, to be impacted by our church services, to come in and know that God is real, know that the presence of God is real. Yeah. And so sometimes relevancy is not the best option in that. You and I are big fans of applications of orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And if people don't know, orthodoxy it's the historic Orthodox Church, which is very traditional. It's swinging incense and Eucharist every Sunday and all these things like that. And, culture always changes. What's in today is flared jeans. Well, that was in the 1970s. So if you're always just changing, the Jinko jeans and all that. So if you're chasing relevancy, at some point it circles back. And at some point you're just continually, and to me, you are going to always be applying those new trends. But if it doesn't have any transformational implications. So like to me, this whole conversation as it stands right now, like doing church in VR, though it's relevant, to me, it's not transformational. So I'm not a fan of it right now. Could it be at some point? Yes. But where it stands right now with VR, I don't believe it's very transformational. I just believe it's relevant. So a lot of the churches, which are really great, and I look up to all of them who in general, but those that are like, hey, they're having church conferences and they're like, you should start exploring offering your church services in VR and all that. Well, I'm very anti that relevant thing, because I play it out in my head and say, okay, so I charge my headset, I put it on, my life's changed. How do I get discipled now?
Yeah.
Where do I get baptized?
Yeah.
Where do I take communion? Well, you take it on your own. Well, all of those things are congregational things.
Right.
Yeah.
Like Jesus never gave us those impetuses to personally do on your own. Baptism was meant to be done in public around people.
Right.
Communion was meant to be done with people in a Passover setting on a table, saying we do it in rows now and stuff, but same implication. So all these scriptural, to me, ecclesiastical conversations are meant to be done with people. And so I look and I go, well, VR is actually, if you have a VR church, you're actually encouraging the opposite.
Right. Yeah.
I would probably, if I was a church and had VR, I would say VR experience. I wouldn't say VR church, because I would never want someone to think
that's a good point.
That them putting on that headset. So should you do it? Should you embrace? But like the way that you word it and the way that you get pressure off people's shoulders matters. So if someone's walking around and they go, do you go to church? Yeah, I go to church on my headset. No, you shouldn't. You should say that my church has an experience on its headset. It's really fun and it's really cool, but my church has taught me that it's not a replacement for what I have to do in person.
Yeah.
That. So that's, to me, that's just really the summation of relevancy versus transformation. Is there's always going to be cool, relevant things, and I don't think you should embrace everything and always, all the time. I think that as a leader, you're meant to be a gatekeeper to what is really going to change people's lives, and then what is just going to make you popular and cool, or what's going to make you relevant. You just want to be in a headline or a newspaper because you were the first to do blank,
I'm pretty sure when Jesus said, when 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'm pretty sure that word gathered probably implied like real human beings gathering within a space. I don't know the Greek of that, but I'm pretty sure that that's probably what that implies. But there are those non-negotiables. There are those that should last forever, as long as the church is in this world. The preaching of the word, the prayer, the singing of psalms and hymns, worship, and the community aspect, and the table, the community and communion.
Yeah, there's some patents out there. There's some patents out there by Apple and a few other companies where what they're endeavoring to do is you're going to be able to have glasses And I'm going to basically be able to take my phone, and my case will have like a stand or something. And so I'll put my phone down on my table with a stand. And then you're going to actually first use the Polygram app, and you're going to scan your room, and you're going to put your phone down, and then you're going to be wherever you guys are at, and you're going to put your glasses on, and you're going to do a room scan, and then you're going to put your phone down. And then before we jump on, we're going to pick whose room we want to meet in. So we say, oh, okay, Adam scanned his room, so I'm going to pick Adam's room.
Okay.
So now it's scanned this whole space.
Mm-hmm.
So now when you guys put your glasses on, your phone is catching your body, and it's now putting you in the room of that space. And when we put our glasses on, there is very little degree in separation in which the real world and what we're experiencing, that line isn't going to be very noticeable.
Okay.
And so the way you and I are having this conversation in the room, like you could see my phone not everyone could see on camera or video, but I have my phone up against the like stand here. Your phone will be doing that with you. And as I look at you with the glasses, I will see you as you sit in front of me right now. And your phone is going to replace whatever table you're sitting at with the table I just scanned. And it's going to replace your environment with the environment that I just scanned. And we chose to meet in my room. To me, that begins to be a place where now you can almost begin to start to say we're having VR church. Like it's getting to a place where you and I, in the same way we're seeing each other right now, you and I could grab in a communion element. We could grab juice. We could partake it together. We could open up our Bibles together. We could see a preacher together, and we could be sitting next. So in the future, we're going to be able to scan our sanctuary. Someone could put on their glasses, choose to be an ALFC sanctuary, and it'll place them in one of the seats in the sanctuary as they're watching the stage, as they're hearing the word of God.
But the key thought is it's a supplement to the main.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's not
I still think it's always a supplement, but to me,
it's not replacing.
To me, that is where you could get to a place where I personally have a conviction it's never going to be replaceable, but it is going to be the place. It's going to be near the place where you could say almost like, because literally when the message is done, if we're both still logged in with our phones facing us, I could look next to me and be like, hey, Aaron, blah, blah, blah. Like, how was your day? And the nature of what gathering with the saints is meant to be.
It could still be meaningful in as much as talking to you over the phone can still be meaningful.
Right.
Or sending an email back and forth can still be meaningful. So I don't think we discredit the fact that it could produce value and meaning to a person's life. But I think the real question is that question of replacement.
Right. But that's where I'm at, where I'm like, I don't believe it's ever going to, it should be ever be allowed. But there are a lot of churches already with the way VR is already at. Mm-hmm. They're saying, hey, you could stay at home and you could do this. And if you're antisocial or you struggle with people or whatever, like, but to me, you're just giving a druggie more drugs, you know?
Yeah, see, that's funny because I am the typical introvert that would appeal to.
Yeah, you're a hobbits.
But that's what I'm saying. But I would never like go to that though. Like I would still would if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna go all in
for sure.
Like I'm not, and I'm an introvert, so I'm the type of person that should be appealing to. It's not, and I'm not saying I'm everybody. I'm everybody. Like I'm my own. I'm unique. I am me. I don't put my own standards on anybody other than me. But I am that introvert, and to me, it's like, well, if I'm going to go to church, I'm going to go to church. I'm not like.
But there's hundreds of churches that are replacing their language to say, "Hey, it's an okay thing to join us in VR, and you can put on whatever avatar you want. You can make yourself a dragon or whatever you feel comfortable with." Because and they're really, I mean, I can point you stuff.
I could be a tranny.
Yeah, you could be a woman on it.
All right.
I don't think they're going to that point. I mean, they're still pretty fundamentalist and conservatively led churches, but they are legitimizing VR churches. Hey, it's a legitimate form of worship, and I'm still at the point where I 100% disavow that and disagree with that. The only point I'll start exploring it is when it gets to the place that I just explained, in which I'm still a very fundamental way believer, is that I still would not encourage it. But if another church encouraged it, I would say, well, it's pretty relatively close to what we're going for. So I could see where you're graying the area where you could call that VR church, but where it's at right now, it's like, and I'm known in the tech space, so I'll go to church stuff, and they're like, I bet Abundant was the first to do VR church, huh? And I'm like, no, I'm actually against it, and they're like, what? It shocks them.
Can you block people? Because I could see like really weird, creepy people
for sure
taking advantage of that, doing crazy stuff.
No, yeah. There's
like you can block them.
There's admins, and you could block them. I mean, it's cool,
but like they could.
Cool.
That wouldn't stop them from getting away with it once. So if you had like somebody who wanted to flash the church,
you can't.
That happened to my mom.
What?
My mom
on a Zoom though.
I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen. I know how creepy. I know how weird psychos think.
Explain that story, please.
My mom.
What?
Who's a boomer was doing she was doing a women walking prayer revival Zoom.
Jeez.
So it was,
your mom Baptist with
yeah. Big Baptist.
With all that with all the words.
So it's ladies in their 60s and they're praying over Zoom during COVID. And during the Zoom prayer, some pornographic images came on the screen during their prayer. Yeah, that was
the host.
Now just imagine Adam's concept explaining like somebody can totally take advantage of that. And at least get away with it once.
Well, no, right now, your avatar doesn't track your clothing or your movement. It just tracks your face and talking.
Oh, I thought I'm looking at you I'm looking at you.
No, you're like a cartoon character.
What?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's like
silly.
all over TikTok.
Oh, it's a cartoon.
VR is not at a point where I can.
Oh,
look at yeah.
That's corny.
But there's people legitimizing it because it's relevant. And that's my point.
Yeah.
Is like, just because it's relevant doesn't mean it's transformational.
I think we have to trust the Book of Acts.
Yeah,
of being a transformational way to do church.
Oh, and you
can always find one or two anecdotes to legitimize any decision. Mm-hmm. So I'll hear a story. Someone will say, when that church did VR, I had heard of they had a story of a guy that is in his wheelchair and he was able to join in and he gave his life to Christ being on that VR and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, well, that's a great anecdote.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great one-time story.
Yeah.
But you can find that for anything
live
you're
streams.
Trying to legitimize and do. Yeah, the guy could have watched a live stream and had that same experience or whatever. And so to me, it's like just because something's there and just because something's available doesn't mean you should turn a ship or invest resources in it per se, unless you feel like that's just supposed to be your guys' jam. If it is, do it. Like I would respect a church that says, hey, we're doing VR church. We definitely don't recommend that everyone else do this. This is just where we feel like God has us right now because we have 50 people in our church who wanted to start this ministry and this outreach. And okay, cool. But I'm in meetings and conferences where they're like, you get the implication, like, if you ain't done VR church yet, you're not cool. You're not. And I'm like,
really?
And I'm like, y'all, I'm the coolest, and we are not doing that.
Well, it just sounds like my kids got the thing a couple years ago for Christmas, and they never use it. They're on their iPad most of the time still.
Yeah,
so I wonder, like, if a kid, if that concept, it doesn't even attract a kid. Then, and I know Meta's lost billions of dollars investing into this whole concept with metaverse. And it's like, if my own kids aren't attracted to this, what makes me think an older person, especially an older person, go back to older person who has like visual issues, they're going to get headaches. They're going to get headaches. Yeah. They're going to have issues with their eyes, putting that thing on and trying to.
I think Mark really dropped the ball in terms of turning Meta onto the ship of VR. That to me is, as a leader, once you start isolating yourself from people and other ideas, he's been unaccountable for so long that he was able to do whatever he wanted and turn the company, to me, in the wrong direction. But because Facebook is like whack to go on now, so it's changed so much. But overall, it's like when you read the Apple patents and what Apple is trying to do, that's going to be legitimate. That's what I just named, and that's going to truly deepen people's relationships and connectivity. But we're probably 10 years from that reality. Could be sooner, but for the most part, probably 10 years from that reality. So we got time. So to me, I'm like, when I'm in a room and I'm like, okay, let me just start with, I think whatever you think we're talking about, whatever you think could be like a benefit, we're probably 10 years away from. Let's worry about what's happening next month. Like,
and then you have the issue of churches, affordability, though, because when it reaches the point where it's actually could become popular, it's going to have to be it's going to have to be the size of glasses for somebody.
Yeah, it looks cool when you read the patents.
It's the glasses, and it's going to have to be affordable.
Yeah,
and so like you said, like when's that going to happen?
Yeah,
20 years from now, it has to be
enough where,
especially with the economy and market the way it is now.
To me, it has to be in a place where 1 out of 5 people have it. If that's when you start, it's valued of resourcing. Till then, it's like. But to end it to what you're saying, that to me is the difference between relevance and transformation. Is there's a lot of areas I still am very much old school in. Podcasting to me is relevant, but it's transformational. We've seen people's change in their lives, so it's worth the effort, the investment, and the time. But if it was just like, oh, everybody's doing podcasting, we should too, and and like we've said, and we should talk about our own, our own application of Bible scriptures. Well, to me, it's like, oh, well, you're being relevant without any thought into how it could be transformational. Mm-hmm. So I told a guy, like I was talking to a pastor recently. He's like, yeah, I'm thinking about podcasting. I don't. I'm just always preaching. I don't know that I want to preach in. And I knew about this guy that he loves reading.
Okay.
Like he loves reading books. So I told him, start a podcast where you review books that you read, that you like.
Right.
Like, you don't got to do what everyone else is doing.
Right.
don't do it.
Like, I would say it's,
But in the sense of like,
be different. Yeah.
I said, hey, I think as a leader, you should have some type of podcast, but I also don't think you have to do it like everybody else. So I think it is relevant to have one. But I think you should be transformational. And if you preach all the time, you don't have to do sermon reviews or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, just
there are pastors,
review the Chronicles of Narnia.
There are pastors I follow. There are pastors I follow that smoke pipes and cigars.
Yeah.
And like their podcast is smoking pipes and cigars and reading one of their books, like going through one of their books or talking about like some random thing that has like really like nothing to do with the church, but it's their interest, it's their hobby, but they still call themselves like they still take on that role. It's a part of their ministry or their church, the pastors and pipes or whatever.
Yeah. And there's the Catholic Church. There's the priests that do beer reviews or something like that. They drink
Pints with Aquinas.
Yeah,
is
Pints
one
with
popular
Aquinas.
one.
Yeah. But it's like, do you, boo boo? Like,
be different. Like, be different.
Do you,
like be different. Like, there's so many people saying the same stuff out there, and I'm just like, man, like, just be different. Like, do something different. Yeah. If you're gonna do it, do something different, like what we're doing.
Yep. Aaron, you got any closing thoughts? We really had a plan going in today. We were going to go more to Beyond the Letter question. You like the magazine?
This is an excellent magazine.
Thank you so much.
I recommend it. We're going to title this podcast Catch and Release.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
We really like the color orange. I've noticed that. Is there something about the color orange?
There's a psychology behind it. Yeah.
Because I noticed we do it a lot here in our church, and there's orange here. What's up with orange?
Well, red means power. So that's why you'll see some like McDonald's also hunger, I think. It's power and hunger. So that's why you have a lot of fast food restaurants that will choose red. Yellow is another form of that. Yellow is joy. Mm-hmm. Yellow is joy. So that's why McDonald's is yellow and red. And so what is the psychology behind orange? Back when I made our church color orange, I had a reason for it. So I just try to rephrase. Energetic. It's a place of energy.
Foster encouragement, motivation, and drive.
Yeah. Encouragement, motivation, and drive is what the color yellow brings. So that's why we made ours orange, blue, and gray. So
cool.
You got any closing thoughts, Aaron?
I agree with everything you said about the dictatorship to democracy, and it made me think about leadership and the fact of it's less about authority and more about influence. Mm-hmm. And you get more influence when you're relational, and you're more relational when you allow other people to have input on the vision.
Yeah, that's great.
I've heard it, and then also I've heard of this concept of the 12. The number 12 being significant as far as especially the bigger you get. you have your 12 disciples, and then they have their 12, and it becomes this pyramid.
Yeah.
You know, the 12, the 12, the 12. So the person way down here, they shouldn't expect to be one of the 12 of the senior guy, but he has his 12.
Yeah.
Right.
That are his main compatriots and people he invests in, and then they invest in their 12, and so on and so forth.
And what crumbles that is pride. You have to be humble enough to know this is your 12. You're not on that 12, but you have a 12.
Right.
But I mean,
right.
And that's historically the early church, how they were able to grow so rapidly. Whether you look at the Catholic Church or any of the Orthodoxy churches, they all have their version of a leader, because Israel always wants a king. And so I've always believed that someone has to be the final call. I've been in other areas where they're like, all 7 of us equally have the same call, equally have the same power, and it ends with the 7 of us. I think there is one man or woman that I agree with end on, you know, and then from there you have like Jesus. So then in Catholic, which
is why I'm sympathetic to kings and dictators nowadays.
You're super pro it. I know. I get. But I get it. You need one person responsible for the decisions, and so you also have to be able to have a place though where you can get them out if they aren't. So that's where the king and the dictatorship thing kind of begins to get messed up. But in like the Catholic Church or Orthodoxy churches, everyone votes for that pope or that leader. So they all, not everyone, but the cardinals have that say. Yeah. But then it goes, the further leadership you have. So just particularly in the Catholic Church, which I'm not co-signing on it, I'm just looking at on a leadership structure. You know, you have the one leader, then you have the cardinals, then you have the bishops, then you have the diocese, you have the leaders of the diocese, then you go down, and then you have the priesthood, and then the priesthood pastors the people, the congregants.
Right.
So there's a clear, and you wonder, well, how have they been able to have 1 billion adherences still in the world today? Well, because they have a very clear way of communicating leadership levels.
Hierarchy.
Yeah.
And that's what people, with all this talk of equality, that's a very important point, that God structured the world to be a hierarchy. Just because we're equal image bearers doesn't mean that we're equal in positions of authority and power. And and the same thing is even true in heaven. Because the Bible says there are positions of authority. The Bible says there are elders. There are 24 elders. Yeah. The 12 disciples will be the 12 leaders of the tribe of Israel. So there is a hierarchy, even in heaven. Even in heaven. Does that blow you away?
No, it's true.
But when you think about it, it's not this commune, right? Yeah. When we get to heaven, it's not going to be this commune.
And then when heaven comes down to earth, it's clearly...
There's not going to be jealousy. There's not going to be envy. There's not going to be any sins associated with it. But there's still a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy of angels. Michael the archangel, different angels.
But we've rejected it since day one. It was God, man, woman, animal. Animal deceives woman, who convinces the man and they hide from God. So we always reject the hierarchy that
there
God
you go.
has
Boom.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
That's rich.
Riveting.
That's riveting. What a great consolidation of thought in this last moment, Caleb. That's money. I think it's the cap. I think we need to get you every color of that hat you're wearing today.
Because it's Middle Eastern.
It
makes me more rooted and based.
Asum lam alaikum.
Yes.
Yes. You don't. That doesn't sound familiar to you, Deanna? Deanna's in here and she's Lebanese. Asum. No, it's not. Assalamu alaikum is Muslim. Assum alam alaikum is Christian. Thank you. See, she caught it because she knows Arabic.
There you
She's
go.
fluent.
And
that one. I said that one.
That's tongue.
That's tongue. That's called spirit filled. Y'all didn't know, but I got my Arabic down. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just needed the interpreter for it. So all right, everybody, God bless. Yeah. Today we had with us, we got Jermaine on audio, we got Corey out here being the boss man.
Let's go.
Chelsea and Nancy over here holding up my magazine that she never read or listened to the podcast. Hey, listen, it's okay. We got Gabe on the 1s and 2s, and then we had Pastor Aaron with us today, my boy Caleb. Yep. And here's what I just want to give everyone a heads up. Pastor Aaron's coming out with a book soon.
Oh, Jesus.
I love it. I'm excited for it. It's a devotional level book, but I'm not going to go into it right now because when it comes out, he's going to come on with us and then I'm going to do a harder promo on it because I think it's dope. I've read it. I've read like 5-10 pages of it because it wasn't done at the time that I first read it.
Wow, cool.
But it's dope. It's a devotional on Proverbs, book of
Awesome.
Proverbs.
Let's
So
go.
I'm excited for it. We'll promo it when it
Nice.
when it
Thank you.
actually comes out.
Nice.
Is that the closer?